Jnanatimirandasya Giranjana Savakaya Chaksho Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Ukam Karoti Vachalam Hangam Mangayati Garim Yakripa Tamaham Vande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shri Mate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shanyavari Paschachari Satarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
So I will say a few words of introduction before we start speaking. Maharaj, you will be the main speaker today.
I thought it was dialogue.
It will be a dialogue. Nevertheless, you will be the main speaker. So I'm very happy to start this meeting with or dialogue with Srila Niranjana Maharaj. Srila Niranjana Maharaj doesn't need any introduction. He has been tirelessly preaching in different countries of the former Soviet Union from the time when the Soviet Union was not former, when the Soviet Union was still there. So he came first time in 88, right?
89.
89. So he came to Russia, to Soviet Union many years back, and since then he knows many devotees in Russia, and he's loved by all of them, not only in Russia, in all Russian-speaking countries and all countries of the former Soviet Union. And yes, and at the same time, he has been known for stressing developing personal relationship with Srila Prabhupada, and therefore I asked Maharaj to speak on this topic or to talk on this topic with me. As you know, the whole year we have been discussing different kinds of relationship. We started with Madan Mohan Prabhu about relationship in general, that bhakti is all about relationship. Bhakti is nothing but relationship with God, relationship with devotees, relationship with the holy name. So this topic is very much intricately and intimately connected with bhakti itself, with the science of bhakti. What does bhakti means? Bhakti means relationship without offenses, based on love. And we had several conversations along these lines on different aspects of relationships. And the last conversation for this year, before we stop it for some summer vacation, is relationship with Srila Prabhupada, which is in one sense foundational for every member of ISKCON. And definitely Niranjana Maharaj is the best choice to speak on this topic. And without any other long introduction, I suggest that we go, and I read the first question which was suggested for our conversation. You saw our questions which were...
I did see them. Yes, I did see them. But
I'm looking forward here.
I don't know where they are. That's all.
Yeah.
Oh, I found them. Okay.
You found them. Okay.
Yes.
Now I have to find them myself.
You want me to send them to you in the chat?
Yeah, you can send it to me in the chat. Yes.
Okay. Just now coming. Won't accept them.
Oh yeah, chat. It's so difficult with these chats. I know it's a drag with. Yeah, Mohan send it. What is the proper way for a disciple to develop his or her relationship with Srila Prabhupada and with a spiritual master? We have heard that one should give one's heart to his her spiritual master. But it is hard to relate how to give your heart to both Srila Prabhupada and spiritual master. Kindly explain. It's a very good question. I'm eager to hear what you have to say about this.
Well, I'm not sure I can give that much Shastric reference in answer to this question. I can speak to you only from some practical experiences myself and realizations. In fact, I remember speaking on this topic. I think it was for last year for my Vyasa Puja. I spoke on this topic. And I'm going to explain it from my own frame of reference, and my own experience of Srila Prabhupada and the previous acharyas. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, because my experience with Srila Prabhupada is that the more I hear from him, the more my appreciation for them increases. And the more that I hear from them, the more I appreciate what Srila Prabhupada has given me in terms of their association in his teachings. It's sort of like a mutually, what's the word?
Enhancing,
yes. Relationship with each other. And I had an experience. I'm trying to remember exactly how he described it. Yes, okay, I remember now. I don't want to bring it just simply from memory. It should be something that should be living, that I'm always experiencing. But when I first started, when I came to Mayapur in 2020, I had the opportunity to listen to Srila Prabhupada's lectures more than I had ever had the opportunity before. Let's put it that way. I mean, I've listened to his lectures. I read all of his books, and but now I found myself sitting down a minimum of 4 times a day, either in doing my daily exercises or in honoring Prasadam, and just nobody else, because I was alone. It was me and Srila Prabhupada. And as I was listening to his lectures every day, somehow they became a lot more relevant, more than they had ever become before. And the reason why I gradually realized their relevance even more is because I spent more time also over the course of the last 2 years than I had previously, studying the work of the previous acharyas, works of the previous acharyas, especially for those who attend my class, listening to Brihad Bhagavatamrita. I've been studying very intensely Brihad Bhagavatamrita for almost 2 years now. And along with my studies in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, also included studies in Laghu Bhagavatamrita, especially Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Sarata Darshini, Srila Jiva Goswami in the Sandarbhas, Lagu Vaishnava Toshini, Brihad Vaishnava Toshini. I found myself going there a lot more than I had gone previously. And I found that I wasn't really reading Srila Prabhupada's books so much as I had been previously. I was reading the books of the previous acharyas, and they were enhancing for myself my own realizations of the topic, and but yet, along with reading the works of the previous acharyas, I was always listening to Srila Prabhupada every day. That's my daily sustenance. And one thing that evolved over the course of the last 2 years is that Srila Prabhupada's lectures that I was listening to every day, they became deeper than I'd ever heard them. I mean, I've heard them before, I listened to them, but I began to realize that Srila Prabhupada was speaking on topics, the same topics I had been delving in. They may not have been given as much detail as what I found in the works of the previous acharyas, but they were all just simply very valuable nuggets, gold nuggets, that were coming to life. And I began to appreciate how these are all coming from the lips of my spiritual master. It's coming from the lips of Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada is giving me the association. Because one book I read sometimes relentlessly is Amritavani. I love it. So many of the things that I find in Amritavani, which is in Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's instructions on many relevant spiritual topics. Hearing them from Srila Prabhupada, again, even though I went elsewhere, only increased my appreciation even more for what I was hearing from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Srila Jiva Goswami. And I would say that experience in of itself convinced me of the potency of Guru Parampara, something that Srila Prabhupada always spoke about, always embodied. He always embodied it because whenever we heard from Srila Prabhupada, he was always quoting our previous acharyas. He was always speaking about Parampara. And the result being is that I found that my relationship with Srila Prabhupada and my love for Srila Prabhupada became just ever increasing as a result of hearing the words of the previous acharyas, which may have been seen as listening to them directly and bypassing Srila Prabhupada. Now, I wasn't reading so much of Srila Prabhupada's books in the last 2 years. I'm just reading all these other acharyas I mentioned. But what happened is that Srila Prabhupada's lectures that I was listening to every day became so pregnant, so much more pregnant. And I believe it was a result of his blessings, because he always represented the Parampara. I believe, in answer to your question, and you might say I've gone about it in an indirect way, but in answer to your question, I would say that for devotees now, if they listen to their spiritual masters, and if their spiritual master gives them what they have received from our Parampara, there's no confusion between where to repose in one's love, because the power of disciplic succession comes through in that way. And that's what Prabhupada taught. Shariya Vishaya, what is it? Narottam Das Thakur. I get lost since I start quoting Sanskrit. I'm so used to speaking just simply English. But one has to get the mercy of the spiritual master and the Vaishnavas, and both have to be there if one actually wants to achieve the perfection of devotional service. It's the duty of the spiritual master to give the parampara. And if the spiritual master delivers the parampara through disciplic succession, then an ever-increasing appreciation will be there if devotees also listen to Srila Prabhupada. That, I believe, is the duty of everyone, because he's our founder Acharya. Everything that we've learned by his mercy. Everything we have, the association we have, is by his mercy. Some devotees may see it as the mercy of their spiritual master, but where would their spiritual master be without Srila Prabhupada? I'd say it's not just a duty. To say it's a duty almost somehow implies that something I have to do, and I need to be more spontaneous in the execution of devotional service than to simply do the things I have to do. I have to do the things that I want to do. But if the spiritual masters remind the devotees of Srila Prabhupada's presence, his example, his purity, his compassion, and everything else that he brought to us in a very relevant way to the lives of the devotees will want to hear from Srila Prabhupada. And there's no confusion between giving one's love to one's spiritual master and giving one's love to Srila Prabhupada. There should be no conflict. It's not a divided heart. It's not a divided heart as long as the heart of the speaker is there with Prabhupada. It's not a divided heart. And I would say that this realization became exceptionally enhanced for me in the last 2 years, spending most of my time associating with previous acharyas, but yet listening to Srila Prabhupada every day. I don't know if that answers the question. It may raise more questions than I've answered. If it does, I'm fine with it.
I think it perfectly answers the question, because the question is asked from the framework of quote unquote ordinary consciousness, which or I don't want to be offensive to anyone, some sort of neophytish consciousness which always tries to find some sort of contradictions, or always divides something. The best Shastric or Acharya's illustration to the point which you give is the verse from Manakh Shiksha by Srila Raghunath Das Goswami. Nadarman Shruti Ganam Niruktam Kila Kuru Vraje Radha Krishna Prachura Parichari Mehatanu Sachisunam Nandishvara Pati Sutatve Guru Varam Mukunda Prestatve Smara Parama Jastram Nanu Manaha, where he says to his mind, please don't divide yourself into many branches. Try to understand that everything which you are doing is connected to one Radha Krishna, and Radha Krishna is the same Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not different than Radha and Krishna, and your spiritual master is not different from Radha and Krishna in a sense, because they have very intimate relationship. Therefore, the ekantata, or one-pointedness of our love or our relationship, is not disturbed by having so many objects of our love, because these all objects of our life, they are united, they're the same, they're connected, intimately connected with each other, and therefore there is no contradiction. We still, the love is still one-pointed when we see the unity, when we divide in our consciousness, our spiritual master is something, and Srila Prabhupada is something, previous acharyas are something else, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is something else, and Radha Krishna is again something else. Then it's like this. But if we understand the unity, the tightness of their relationship and their love, then, by relating to one, we're relating to all of them. By loving one, we're loving all of them. And love to anyone in this unified chain means increasing love to everyone else. As you said, your appreciation of previous acharyas increased, and that increased your love and appreciation to Srila Prabhupada, because it's very clear that they are intimately connected. So it's a perfect answer to this question.
And you gave a perfect philosophical explanation to it as well.
Okay. So the next question is also very interesting. Maharaja, do you personally can tell that you please Srila Prabhupada with your service? How can you tell? Please share how you developed your relationship with Srila Prabhupada, how we can understand what is the will of Srila Prabhupada in our day-to-day life and actions, what he wants from us, what he expects from us. Why our connection with Srila Prabhupada is sometimes very clear and self-evident, and sometimes it fades away, becomes little flimsy, etc. So the question is, how do we know that Srila Prabhupada is pleased with our action, with our service, and how to make sure that our understanding of his pleased is real, not just something imaginary, and how you tighten the connection. Most relevant question on this topic.
Should I understand that the question is being asked from a frame of reference of myself being Prabhupada's disciple? Or should I understand that the frame of reference is a question that's being asked on behalf of all the devotees who are listening? How do they know when Srila Prabhupada is pleased?
I think you should start with the first, and then you can broaden the perspective to everyone.
Because this question is has many aspects to it.
Facet, yeah. You can start with your personal experience, because there is, how do you personally can tell that you please Srila Prabhupada? So the first aspect is your personal experience.
Well, from my own personal experience, I know that any realization I get, any spiritual happiness I get, any benefit that I get in terms of my Krishna consciousness could never manifest without Prabhupada's mercy and his blessings. I mean, that's a conviction I've had ever since I came to the Krishna consciousness movement and decided to surrender myself to Prabhupada's lotus feet, that I'm not responsible for anything of any value in my life. If I have anything of value in my life, it's because I've taken shelter of Srila Prabhupada. Realizations are valuable. Spiritual happiness is valuable. Association with Vaishnavas is valuable. The opportunity to take darshan and render service to the deities is valuable. Anything of any value that gives me some spiritual happiness can only manifest because of Prabhupada. So if I get any of these things, any of these experiences of spiritual happiness, a realization, something that, just like the night before last, I was speaking to Shiva Maharaj, and we were talking about Braj, talking about a realization I had from reading one of the commentaries of Jiva Goswami, where he was explaining how Krishna is himself and gives himself completely so much that even if he's in a solitary place, alone, he's always behaving, he's always acting in his form of, or in a way that is completely forgetful of his divinity. And I started to think about the examples of in Ananda Vrindavan Shampoo, how Krishna was stealing butter, and he was looking at his reflection, and he was alone. And Jiva Goswami had given this example that even when he's alone in a solitary place, here he was alone, and he was looking at his reflection in the column, and as he was looking at the reflection in the column, he was thinking, this might be Balaram. He's caught me, and I'm stealing butter, and therefore his immediate reaction was, oh brother, please don't tell mother. If you don't tell mother, I'll share some of this brother with you, and so many examples. And as I was speaking to Shiva Maharaj about this topic, and because it was so relevant to the points I was discussing that day, I was feeling some pleasure, undeserved pleasure. I always know that if I get spiritual pleasure, it's undeserved. And I always remain conscious of that. If it's undeserved pleasure, if it's undeserved happiness, it means there's only one person I can attribute in my life that I've gotten something, received something undeserved. Because if I look at my own qualification, I don't deserve any of it. Nothing. And therefore, put two and two together, and therefore I understand that I can only experience these realizations. I can only experience some happiness. I can only appreciate and relish the association of devotees because somehow Prabhupada's pleased with my efforts, my tiny little efforts, my tiny little steps to do something. Somehow Prabhupada is pleased. And that's how I in my life, I live on those drops. I live on those drops. They carry me, they sustain me. They're life-giving. And so that's first part of the question. I guess you asked, how do I know how Prabhupada is pleased? I wish I could say that I know Prabhupada's always pleased with me, which means that I would also have to reflect in saying that I'm always feeling spiritual happiness. But I don't. So I can understand that sometimes I may be doing something that's pleasing to Srila Prabhupada, and sometimes I'm not doing something that's pleasing to Srila Prabhupada. But if I know I'm doing something that's not pleasing to Srila Prabhupada, I have faith that Prabhupada will show me that I'm not doing something that's pleasing to him and will correct me from within. And because he's non-different from he's Chaitya Guru. and he's within the heart. And when I'm not doing something that's pleasing to Srila Prabhupada, I'm quite sure that I'll get some mercy, and because it's always there, it's always available, and I may get a little correction, so that I can do something to make him smile and become pleased again. So
You're speaking in retrospect, in one sense. At least one aspect of this question: how do we know at the moment when we are supposed to choose something, at the time of choice, which is sometimes very difficult? How do we know what Srila Prabhupada wants me to choose or to do at the moment of the difficult choice, and in general, the general direction of my life? Is it pleasing to Srila Prabhupada what I'm doing, or is it something which is my own concoction?
well, I often use that purport that Srila Prabhupada speaks about in the third canto of the Bhagavatam, in the prayers of Brahma for creative potency, in an effort to answer that question, or similar questions. When Prabhupada explains that fortunate is a person who's entrusted with the responsible work, and when in the execution of his responsible work, if he's always conscious that he's subordinate to the will of the Lord, then even though the external result may not appear to be the right result, but because he's conscious, he's subordinate, then it will become right, because he's in the right consciousness. And if he's not conscious of his subordinate position, what does Krishna say also in the Bhagavad Gita, 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and all activities just depend upon me and work under my protection. Such devotional service, be fully conscious of me. If you're conscious of me, you'll cross over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. But if you do not work through such consciousness and act through false ego, not hearing me, you'll be lost. In a similar vein, in the execution of our services, when we have to make decisions, we should try to make the decision which is in terms of subordinate to the instructions that we received from Krishna and his authorized representatives. In my case, I try to make decisions in terms of what I may have read in Srila Prabhupada's books, what I may have heard in one of Prabhupada's lectures. But I'm also very, very conscious that in following Srila Prabhupada, I'm very conscious that sometimes it's more important to follow the spirit of Prabhupada's instructions than a letter. Because I believe, and we talked about this once before, I believe, maybe it was when you asked me to speak to the Bhaktivedanta Academy. I think I talked about this, the difference between the spirit and the letter. So I was giving the example, I seem to recall, that sometimes people take the letter of Prabhupada's instructions, and then when giving it to others, they have a tendency to ram it down others' throat. Whereas Prabhupada's spirit was not like that at all. Prabhupada's example was not like that at all. Of course, Prabhupada could sometimes be very strict, but he was also very liberal. And he always took into account what was best for the recipient to hear and to accept. And he was very, very conscious. In fact, I even remember bringing up that point in reference to something from Prabhupada Lilamrita, how Prabhupada was giving talks at one Indian man's home in Calcutta. The Indian man was he was a diplomat of sorts, and well-known, influential person. Prabhupada, he invited Prabhupada to come and speak, and he had gathered many people to hear from him. And one of the things that this man described as his greatest appreciation for Srila Prabhupada is that he understood everyone's mentality in the room. And he spoke because the person who invited them knew the mentality of everyone's in the room. And what he appreciated about Prabhupada is he understood the mentality of everyone in the room, and Prabhupada spoke to each one individually according to what they were able to understand and accept. And he did it all in one talk. I mean, that's Prabhupada. So in the same way that try to do what Prabhupada wants, try to remember Prabhupada's instructions, what he would want us to do in that particular situation, but then depend on him for the result. Be conscious that I'm subordinate to Prabhupada's instruction and Prabhupada's example. And try to remember sometimes in the execution of Prabhupada's instructions, it may be just as important to follow the spirit of Prabhupada's instructions than to follow the letter. Because if we follow the letter all the time, sometimes we may find ourselves following an instruction Prabhupada gave to somebody who needed that instruction, and he may say something completely different to somebody else who needed a different instruction. And this is how, in answer to another question, how I reconcile contradictions. Because Prabhupada, sometimes we have a tendency to be like cherry pickers. You know, we just go in and we pick out what suits our instruction from Prabhupada, what suits our own conclusion, and we pick and choose. But Prabhupada gave different instructions according to different time, places, and circumstances. And we have to be careful to not pull everything out and to say it's universally applicable, but try to understand the spirit behind the instructions. So I would say that in answer to your question and avoiding presenting it in a retrospect way, that's how I would deal with having to make a decision. I would want to make sure when I make that decision, I'm making the decision which I feel Prabhupada would want me to do under the given circumstances and time and place that he would want me to decide, and then depend on his divine will and Krishna's divine will for the result. And if at some point I see that maybe I have to alter, maybe I have to change. Prabhupada changed. He altered many things that he said, that about one thing he said one time, and at a later date he said something quite different. Was Prabhupada a contradictory personality? No, he was an expert judge of time, place, and circumstance. He would want us to become like that also. Does that answer the question? Or
Yeah.
is that?
No, it does. It does. It does. But there is another aspect of this question, but if you allow me, I would like to elaborate something on what
I would
you
more
said.
than allow you. I welcome it, because I said this was going to be dialogue, and you're supposed to be speaking too, and I'm not supposed to be the limelight of the presentation.
Yeah. So first of all, it's a beautiful answer to the first part of the question, that how do we know if Prabhupada pleased? Basically we should know it because we have something valuable in our life. If something comes to our life, realization or some unusual feeling or some experience, that should be the indication that somebody above us is pleased with us, because otherwise how do we get it? It's a perfect answer to the first part of the question. And if we view all the amazing gifts which we get practically on a daily basis, like today I'm in Delhi, and always when I come to Delhi, I'm always overwhelmed by the hospitality of local devotees. Gopal Krishna Maharaj trained them so well. that,
Amazing. Totally
yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
You feel his presence everywhere.
yeah, and I feel Gopal Krishna Maharaj's presence, and I feel, if we look at this as Prabhupada's mercy, totally undeserved mercy coming to us, and mercy means Prabhupada is pleased with us. So that's a very good answer. But I wanted to a little bit elaborate on what you said, speaking on the other part of the question. I also appreciate very much what you said, is that how do we judge whether what we're doing is pleasing to Prabhupada or not, and the moment of when we're doing it. I think there was very important and valuable aspect of what you said, is that what is the motivation of why you're doing this? If the motivation is false ego, then for sure it's not pleasing, no matter how good you're doing. You may be doing amazing things, but if you're motivated by your false identity, false ego, desire for prestige, then there is no question of anyone would be satisfied besides yourself, and even this satisfaction will be very illusory and temporary and flickering. So I wanted to confirm it. Basically, that's how I would answer this question. If you're doing not what you want, but what somebody else wants, and if you're sure that somebody else whose will you're fulfilling is doing something which is pleasing to Prabhupada, then only you can be sure that what you're doing is pleasing to Prabhupada. You yourself not a perfect judge, but if you're doing the will of somebody else who is dear to Prabhupada, who has done so much for him, and you're doing it, willingly and happily, then for sure Prabhupada will be pleased. I sometimes I say that the happiest period of my life, absolutely the best period of my life was when I was, there were different good periods in my life, but when I came to Sweden, and I de facto, although I came to Sweden to serve in the BBT, but very quickly I realized that Kirtiraj Prabhu appropriated me, and there is very little time for my direct service to BBT, and practically 24 hours a day I had to serve Kirtiraj in his, and he was very spontaneous. He was not following Vaidhi Bhakti, he was following Raganuga Bhakti. He would go to bed around 2 o'clock in the morning. And I had to be next to him and basically fulfill whatever he wanted at this particular moment. And he was yelling with his loud voice through the whole Swedish farm, Almixgard, Vaidyanatha, come here, do this, do that. And, in retrospect, that was the happiest period of my life, and I was absolutely happy. And the reason why I was happy, because I was doing not something which I wanted, but because I was doing something which he wanted. And because he was doing something which was very important and valuable for Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada was pleased. So at least this is one very valuable and important criteria how to decide what to do. Just give up your own ideas and do what somebody who knows what he's doing or who is close to Srila Prabhupada asks you to do. And I'm sure many people can confirm my experience, like Madan Mohan, who is serving you. He probably can confirm this completely. And so that was also a very important answer, and I just wanted to elaborate on this part of your answer.
Thank you. Can I also take that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Yes, sure.
I very much agree. And your example was good. It was very good. Because I can imagine at that particular time what it must have been like. Because I know Kirti Raj's mood back then. And I could just imagine what you had to go through. But it's like it it's like a sweet austerity. It's like a sweet austerity to give up your own personal ambitions to satisfy somebody else. What to speak of, to satisfy somebody else whose desires you trust are well connected to doing something which is pleasing to Prabhupada. And I know that for myself, I've oftentimes said this to devotees, to my disciples, that for me, that's how I make decisions. I mean, especially what I feel are very important decisions. I go just reveal them to the devotees I trust, who are motivated to please Prabhupada, who, in my heart, are representatives of Srila Prabhupada, and who, by serving them, gives me such a satisfaction as if I'm serving Srila Prabhupada. And as I've many times even stated, that sometimes because they have a tendency to try to treat me as a friend, I have to try to find secretive ways to do something that's pleasing to them, because they'll never allow me to serve them otherwise. But it's the doorway, it's the threshold, yeah, to pleasing Prabhupada. And I believe every devotee should have that. And if they don't, they're the losers. They're the losers. They lose if they don't have a doorway, that brings them to serving Prabhupada. So your example was very good, and I just wanted to add that to it as well.
Okay, so I'll connect the last part of the second question with the third question, because they are quite connected in any case. So the second part of the second question was why our connection with Srila Prabhupada is sometimes very clear and self-evident, and sometimes it fades away. And the third question, how not to lose the prominence of Srila Prabhupada and pass these values on to the next generation of devotees. So I think, it's connected, because first you have to establish your own relationship and connection. Then only you can talk about giving it further to other people. So please share with us what you think, what is the reason why sometimes we feel some strong connection and sometimes we feel that the connection is not there, it's just a figment of imagination or something like this, and how to establish it firmly and how to give it to others.
I would say that to answer that question, it's quite similar to what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes in Madhurya Kandambani, is the differences between Anishtata Bhakti and Nishtata Bhakti. That, how do we feel Prabhupada's presence? Well, it's because of, because of the obstacles that exist in Anishtata Bhakti, unsteady devotional service, such as Vyuta Vikalpa, indecisiveness, and the tendency to enjoy bhakti by enjoying the, yes, and I forget what the first one is. Come on, what is it?
The first one, Utsahamai, and
Yeah,
then
Utsahamai. Yeah, false enthusiasm. False enthusiasm. We may be very enthusiastic about our surrender to Srila Prabhupada, and but it's not it's based on a false conception of ourselves, and then these are all simply characteristics of devotional service, which is unsteady. How can we expect to be steady in our connection with Srila Prabhupada if we still have these characteristics of unsteady bhakti? And if we want to become more steady in the execution of our devotional service, then we have to, as Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes, the transitional stage between Anishtita Bhakti and Nishtita Bhakti is Nasta Prayesha Abhideshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. And I would say that hearing about Srila Prabhupada is also Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. And if we want to be steady in our faith, in the execution of our devotional service, we should not be clueless about who is Srila Prabhupada. We should hear about him more. We should read about him more. We should read about his exalted qualities and his loving exchanges with devotees, his compassion, his spontaneity, and at the same time his strictness. Every aspect of a devotee are all embodied in the personality of Srila Prabhupada. So much so that to know him is to love him. And if devotees are, unfortunately, I find that many times devotees are just clueless about who is Srila Prabhupada. And I believe it's the duty of their preceptors to somehow remind them that nobody should be clueless about who is Srila Prabhupada in this Krishna consciousness movement. And the more we hear about him and keep him alive, then we can become a little bit more situated in the platform. As I said, the transitional stage is Nasta Prayesha Abhideshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Then we can come to the platform of more remembrance of Srila Prabhupada. That, along with an appreciation of hearing from those who remind us about Srila Prabhupada. And as we said before, we should be very careful to not divide our love in the ways that you so nicely and philosophically described. But therefore, the devotees should be very careful to not relegate Prabhupada into some distant, irrelevant position because I have my guru. He's relevant to everyone. And I believe that's how we can keep Prabhupada alive now in the Krishna consciousness movement. And if that same spirit is there, it can continue to future generations. It can't be artificial. You know me when it comes to artificially imposing, rules and regulations on people. I'm a firm advocate of inspiration. That it's inspiration comes from hearing, and inspiration comes both by hearing and by exemplifying what one is hearing and what one is teaching. If both are there, inspiration will come. It's infectious. If we talk more about Srila Prabhupada in this way, and if we act in remembrance of his personality, and it's infectious. People want to keep Prabhupada alive, rather than just telling everybody, you must read. It can only go so far with, you must read Prabhupada Lilamrita. It only takes people sometimes just only so far. They can't get beyond. I know I must read, but I've got so many other things to do, so many other books I want to read. My Guru Maharaj is speaking on this wonderful topic, and I have only so much time that Okay, you must read Prabhupada Lilamrita. It can only go so far. So it needs to be inspired. And then the more it's inspired, then we'll be able to remember him more. I was just listening. Just the other day, Prabhupada was talking about this point on a lecture. He was talking about two things. He was talking about, actually just this morning, he was talking about writing. He might be happy to hear this. Prabhupada was talking about how he was really emphasizing, very, very important. He said devotees must write if they want to realize. And speaking about that, but he was also, the other day, he was speaking about what we hear, if we repeat what we hear, we will remember. He said, if we don't repeat, we won't remember. And therefore, he was speaking about how a devotee is very kind and compassionate to others by repeating what he has heard, so that others can derive the same benefit and advantage, and you will remember. He was specifically speaking about persons who want to remember. So same thing with Prabhupada. We hear about him, we tell others about him, we speak about topics that are very inspiring about him to us. And if we relish it, that's how Lord Chaitanya distributed love of Krishna, by relishing it himself, and by his relishing it, he was giving it to others. Same way, love for Prabhupada.
It's very interesting, because just today, on the way to Delhi, and I had a long ride, some follower of mine sent to me his essay on some topic connected with the current situation in Ukraine. And I was reading it, and I really appreciated the way he described some internal understanding of what's going on. And it has become very clear to me that, if he would not write this, he would probably forget all these realizations which are coming to him. But because he crystallized them in putting it in writing, choosing the special words, and that it really helped him to imbibe this experience and make it very much alive. So I really thank you for this point, that we should write. We should not only speak, we should not only hear, we should also write. It's one thing when you hear, it's completely other level if you try to repeat what you have heard, but it's yet another level if you try to put it in writing and crystallizing it in a very, succinct and proper way. And then it goes really deeply, and therefore we should hear about Prabhupada if we want to make it steady, our understanding. We should speak about Prabhupada, and we should also write about Prabhupada. I'm speaking it because I wrote a book with different stories of Srila Prabhupada, and it really gave me a lot of new. It's one thing if you just read it, but when you have to put it in writing and think about it, and think about different aspects, how his personality transpires through this exchange which is there, it becomes much more deeply ingrained in your heart. That's for sure. That's a very good advice, because as you very aptly said in the beginning, that the problem of unsteadiness is our unsteady mind, and how to chasten the mind, how to make the mind steady. Hearing is the beginning, speaking is the next stage, writing is the next stage. And then it becomes it really helps you to stabilize, because writing is a sort of meditation. It's a sort of smarana. When you put it in in a very clear way, when you try to put it in a very clear way. So that's a very good and beautiful advice, for sure. There was something else I wanted to say in this regard about making it steady, by steadying our mind. Basically, what you said, very important thing which you said. What is the sign of an unsteady mind? The first characteristic of an unsteady mind is that, the unsteady mind has many goals. It's many branched.
Many branched, that's right.
Yeah. There is no very clear set of values in unsteady mind, and therefore many things are equally valuable. And because they're equally valuable, you want to achieve this and you want to achieve that. If you have a very clear set or hierarchy of values, and if you know that this is the topmost value, then whatever you do, you will try to achieve this topmost value. So basically, if we want to make our relationship with Srila Prabhupada steady, then we have to, put him or his personality and, his role in our life on the top of our value system. And if he is there in the top of our value system, then all our endeavors will be directed to this. But if we have many equally valuable goals which we want to achieve, then, we will have many branched intelligence. It's like there is this deers which live and they have this many branched crown.
Antlers.
Yeah. Yes. So we will be like them.
That will be our minds.
Yeah, branched mind.
Many branched minds
Visible
going out in every direction.
Yeah. So
Prabhupada even said once, why be a jack of all trades when you could be master at one?
yeah, right. Jack of all trades. Yeah, that's very much dependent on the value system, and value system reflects the level of steadiness of our mind or of our intelligence. That's very apt. So the next part of this question, how to give it to others, to the next generation, and what is the responsibility of the present generation in passing this legacy to down the line to others. What would you say about the responsibility of the
Well, I think to some degree you already answered the question. How to give it to the next generation is by writing about Srila Prabhupada. That's definitely a very relevant way. Writing about how Srila Prabhupada, what Srila Prabhupada's instructions, his example, his life, and his movement means to you. And I believe that if devotees leave behind these instructions, very, very valuable instructions, I believe that they should be extracted, and every sincere, serious follower of Srila Prabhupada should be leaving something behind for future generations, because Prabhupada's life was just so variegated in his way of dealings with the devotees, but at the same time consistent. Both elements were there. And then you can always see in whatever devotees speak about Srila Prabhupada, you can always take a thread and you can run that thread through their realizations and see Prabhupada's consistency. But at the same time, you can see how unique Prabhupada was in his dealings with people. as we described before. And the more we leave behind for future generations, and the more people become serious about cultivating pure bhakti, which is the only reason why Prabhupada came, and it's the only thing he came to give us, then it will naturally follow that Prabhupada will be remembered and revered and kept alive within our society, as long as we take the responsibility to keep Prabhupada alive within the society now by speaking about him and by sharing our realizations about him and by writing about him. That's the only hope for future generations. Otherwise, it's very easy to forget. Especially, who knows? We can't predict. Who knows who Lord Chaitanya is going to send to inspire, to revive, or whatever it may be. The Krishna consciousness movement, as time, as it always does, changes everything. And but we can't predict when that time will come and who Lord Chaitanya is going to come and who Srila Prabhupada is going to empower to come whenever the time is needed. But until then, Prabhupada is a Varndacharya. And it is nobody, at least I would say, it's undisputable, nobody presently who is going to even try to replace him.
Yeah, what you said about writing again, or emphasized about writing, nowadays people, they write so much garbage in all this social media.
Don't get me started.
People are writing all the time, but they're writing on such subject matters which are, at the very least, irrelevant.
That's generous. That's generous.
So,
of course, there are good things to be found. I mean, I will not in any way, diminish the importance of those Vaishnavas who've taken full advantage of social media and who give only substance. All glories to substance.
Yeah.
I believe if everybody understands, substance will reconcile all contradictions if substance is always put first and foremost in the center.
And that's, as I said, writing is the best way of meditation, because when you write, you really have to go deeper into the memory and everything and put it in a very proper and chaste way. So that's, so many opportunities are there to write about Srila Prabhupada and his relevance to us, and his personality and his input into our life. Just today we were driving through Rishikesh, and I was doing something, and all of a sudden I heard the sound of loud chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Somebody was sitting there and chanting it loudly with few people. I don't think they were ISKCON devotees. I didn't even see where they are. I just heard the loudspeakers when they were chanting. But immediately I remembered, if it was not for Srila Prabhupada, probably he would not sit here and chant Hare Krishna mantra. It's directly or indirectly a result of Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna mantra is so famous now, and everyone is just, everyone in India just see you and says Hare Krishna, Jai Radhe, and and immediately recognize you. And it's amazing how Srila Prabhupada's influence is growing and growing and growing over the time. how it becomes more and more relevant, you know, and more prominent in the lives of people. So
But to speak of when the Prime Minister of India promotes Prabhupada.
yeah. Anyway, so we have the question number 4. How a disciple's relationship with Srila Prabhupada matures during different stages of spiritual life. Of course, you already answered this by speaking about Anishtita and Nishtita sadhana bhakti. Then, you know, relationship is also Anishtita sambandha and Nishtita sambandha. So it, I guess you can make a case and say that, you know, when Shraddha is there, it means Shraddha and Srila Prabhupada. When Sadhu Sangha is there, it means Sadhu Sangha with Srila Prabhupada. When Bhajana Kriya is there, it's again in relationship with Srila Prabhupada. But maybe you can give some other angle to this question.
Well, I'd say that I mean, I could give it some other angle, but how much time do we have left?
We still have, I would say, half an hour, and then we can keep 15 minutes for the questions.
Okay.
Or so. And
All
we
right.
only have two more topics to deal with, 5 and 6. And then after that, we can answer the questions.
Well, again, I guess this is I have a similar question about the question, because I would say the maturation of a relationship with Srila Prabhupada also depends upon the degree of absorption in Prabhupada's instructions, and I'm not an advocate that everyone will have the same degree of absorption in Prabhupada, and those who do not have the same degree of absorption in Srila Prabhupada are considered to be less privileged or less advanced, because ultimately, palena parachiyate, you know, we judge a tree by its fruit. That the essence of bhakti is to be absorbed in always remembering Krishna and never forgetting Krishna. Smartavyam satatam Vishnu vismata vyogna jatu chit. So absorption, if somebody's actually absorbed in Krishna consciousness, who's always speaking about Krishna, reminding others about Krishna, Yari Deki Tarikaha Krishna Upadesh, then how can we say that they're less in a lesser position than somebody who's always absorbed in speaking about Prabhupada, and you know, there are certain devotees that I know, like if you talk to Badri Narayan Maharaj, you know, he's always just filled with Prabhupada stories. You know, there's not a single class that he'll give where he doesn't tell a story about Prabhupada. You know, it's just
at least 3 of them.
And they're always so wonderful. They're so wonderful, you know, that's like, and you know, they're so relishable. So, but if somebody gives a class and doesn't mention Srila Prabhupada as much as he does, so we say that the class is inferior, he's not, no, I wouldn't go so far to say that he's not absorbed in Srila Prabhupada to the same degree, and therefore he's losing out on something. Absorption is the essence of our philosophy, and to the more that we're ultimately absorbed in that which helps us to remember Krishna, and certainly not everybody is going to have the same level of absorption, is what I'm going to say, in the topics and memories of Srila Prabhupada. But that in any way shouldn't in any way counter anything that I've already said up until now about the importance of at least everybody having a foundational relationship with Srila Prabhupada. is essential for everyone to have a healthy understanding of why he participates in the Krishna consciousness movement, why he sacrifices for the sake of cooperation in the Krishna consciousness movement. Unless there's a solid foundational understanding of Srila Prabhupada, devotees can very easily think that why should I cooperate and go and look for something else? And Prabhupada, of course, knowing that foundational principle of Srila Prabhupada, will help keep a sense of cohesion in our movement. So I would say what's essential for everyone is that they're developing and advancing more in their foundational understanding of Srila Prabhupada, and seeing Prabhupada's presence everywhere in the Krishna consciousness movement, that not a blade of grass moves without his mercy, not a center in ISKCON exists without his divine glance, his divine approval. Everything is meant for his pleasure. Everything should be used for spreading Krishna consciousness, which was the goal of establishing this movement. And the more we're reminded about that in the ways I described previously, by hearing about it in an inspirational way rather than the authoritative way, which is sometimes has an opposite effect. Real authority comes from, again, by example. And so I'm always very conscientious, as well as I know many other devotees are very conscientious, that if they're going to speak authoritatively, they better make sure they're following it themselves. Prabhupada was just speaking about this point just yesterday in class about the importance of teaching by example. He said, without example, it's very important to convince others. It's very difficult to convince others unless the example is there. And he was saying in the specific conversation, he was saying, therefore, my disciples, they must all be good examples if you want others to follow you.
I have another question, which may be a little controversial. It's not listed in this list of questions, but I think it's a relevant topic which we should discuss now, because it's connected with your point about authoritarian way by which we sometimes deal with people, deal with their problems, and by which we sometimes try to impose Srila Prabhupada in their lives. I completely agree with you that this is a very dangerous way to go. Try to force Srila Prabhupada upon somebody and force his authority upon somebody's life, and it, with all good intentions which may be behind that, it will ultimately result in a lot of disservice and disappointment. So connected with this point which you gave right now, how we should be very careful about imposing Prabhupada's authority upon others. There was a person I encountered who said that because of this overemphasized importance of Srila Prabhupada in ISKCON, devotees don't develop spiritually. Again, this is his opinion. I'm not subscribing to this opinion, but I think it's important to give the answer to this notion or to this opinion. He said that because we always speak Prabhupada, 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 it tends to create blind faith in people. And they become kind of blind followers of Srila Prabhupada, and you know, they don't think for themselves. They more or less, you know, join the cult, so to speak, where Prabhupada is everything and Prabhupada is the ultimate savior, this and that. And his point was that, you know, this overemphasized importance of Srila Prabhupada and relationship with Srila Prabhupada ultimately doesn't help people to develop genuine faith, which has an element of self-reliance, or I don't know if what is the proper word, or the element of independent kind of need to develop spiritual practice. Person whom I'm talking about, I'm sure Mad Mohan knows whom I mean. He basically said that you know, we are distributing more or less superstitions, the superstition way of relating to the scriptures by overemphasizing the importance of Srila Prabhupada. So what would you say to
superstitious, did you say?
Yeah, because people, you know, they believe in superhero who is Srila Prabhupada, and they don't feel the need to develop their personal.
Or did you mean superficial?
Superficial and superstitious also, you know, some sort of superstitions. Superficial as well, but superstitious as well. You know, when they substitute the genuine faith into the scriptures, into the logic of the scriptures by superimposing, you know, the figure of Srila Prabhupada, and you know, I don't want to elaborate much, but basically he said that more or less this overemphasis of Srila Prabhupada overshadows the scriptures and the need to develop a personal relationship with the scriptures, personal understanding of the scriptures, something like this, you know. So that's the opinion which is sometimes in one way or another way being declared, and I thought it's important to speak about it, because I also think it's very much connected with the previous point which you made, when the understanding of Srila Prabhupada, again, based on, it's kind of force.
Instead of accepting the spirit of the instruction, accepting the letter of the instruction.
Yeah, and instead of being spontaneous in our relationship with Srila Prabhupada, we feel the need, you know, because there is so much social pressure and emphasis in the society to do this and things like this. So that's why, that's how it is connected in my mind with your previous point.
But I think to some degree I already addressed it, but I'll expand on it, that I would say that an important, a very important, relevant point is the motive behind the instruction that's given. And that any instruction that's given has to be, if it's really going to be for the welfare of others, it has to be free from envy. And because it's described in the Bhagavatam, only when one is free from envy can he actually think of the welfare of others. And Prahlad Maharaj, 5th canto of the Bhagavatam, Svastyastu, whatever that verse.
Allah prasidatam,
yeah. And I agree that to force Srila Prabhupada's instruction as a way of correcting somebody,
manipulating people, controlling.
Controlling him, is going to produce an unfavorable result towards Srila Prabhupada. Why? Because Prabhupada wasn't that way. And as I presented before, Prabhupada was always perfect. But especially right now, I'm listening to Prabhupada's conversations. I've moved from the classes. Now I've been, for the last, by maybe 1-2 months, listening to conversations, how he's speaking to different people. And Prabhupada is so liberal in many respects to whom he's speaking. He's very liberal, even to his disciples. I was just reading the other day something when Prabhupada was giving out Gayatri mantras to Jayananda, and Jayananda, he was asking Prabhupada to help him with the pronunciation, and Prabhupada then had to ask them to give the pronunciation, and then Prabhupada just broke out laughing. He said, "Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You're sincere. Just chant it." Can you imagine? He was even. That's how he was. That's how he was. Sometimes he was strict. He knew who to be strict with, and he knew how to be liberal with somebody. And so it's the same way, I would say, in giving Prabhupada's instructions, that we have to try to understand what Prabhupada's attitude was when he gave those instructions. And of course, it's very difficult to understand. And that's why I said before, sometimes Prabhupada gave one instruction to one person, and he gave a different instruction to somebody else. And if you look at them together, they look like they contradict each other, but actually they don't contradict, because, Mahajano Yena Kata Sapanta, one has to understand, that the solid truth of religious principles is found in the heart of an unadulterated Vaishnava of the Lord, and therefore one has to look for the substance of the instructions and not just look at what the form is, the external. Prabhupada was a pure substance person, and although some people may say that Prabhupada was also interested in form, but he embodied both substance and form. And to somebody who looks upon the way that Prabhupada has become so prominent in our society, and it eclipses almost so much of what can be spontaneously inspired and learned and progressively advancing in Krishna consciousness, because we always have to reconcile it, and try to present it in a way that's that's consistent with the way Prabhupada presented it. I would say a lot of it has to do with what is the reason behind it and the motive behind it. And if the motive is pure, somebody won't be so disturbed. If the motive is something there,
manipulative,
it's going to come out. It's going to come out. And one person can say one thing that Prabhupada said, and it will be so inspirational, and some person can say the exact same thing, and the person will feel so manipulated. The same words. It really depends on the motivation behind the person who's presenting it. And that's why Prabhupada, I believe, he has always emphasized substance. That he wanted us to become free from manipulative motivations. He wanted us to become freed from envy. He wanted us to develop all Vaishnava qualities. And And he taught us by his example how to be perfect Vaishnavas. By his example, just as much and just as important than from his instructions. I don't know if I mean, I didn't give a direct answer to the person who's, he may say that we've too much institutionalized Prabhupada. Sounds to me like what you suggested. And I'm saying, yes, it's possible, but that some may have too much institutionalized Prabhupada. But whenever I tell anybody when I'm speaking about Prabhupada's movement, I always make a very strong claim that anybody who says ISKCON is already made a false statement, because ISKCON is so variegated that you can't make a statement what ISKCON is. You can't paint it with one brush stroke. There's so much variety in ISKCON, and it's healthy. So if somebody is looking for somebody who's not institutionalizing Prabhupada, he'll find it in Prabhupada's movement. Everything is there.
Yeah, I understand what you mean, and I very much agree with you that this this understanding which he tries to promote, this particular person, is based on a very one-sided and narrow understanding what really is going on in ISKCON, because in reality we can see how some people take this emphasis on Srila Prabhupada in unhealthy way. There is no doubt about it. There is some people who are taking it in not a very healthy way, but there is also plenty of people who are taking it in a very proper and healthy and spiritually enhancing way. So I very much agree with this, that you cannot really brush or paint ISKCON with one statement. And there are so many people who develop very deep relationship with scriptures, with Krishna, with our practices, and with Srila Prabhupada as well, and not becoming, the blind followers or blind believers, so to speak. The people who are, like it's a common religious phenomenon when people, they look for a savior, and he is the sure savior, and we just follow the sure savior, and we're saved because we're connected with the savior. It's there, it's a normal thing in any religious organization, but it's not the only phenomenon which we can see. There is so many very deep devotees being developed and being inspired by Srila Prabhupada's personality. So I agree with your answer and with your analysis in this regard. Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to add beyond that?
Yeah, there is a lot of things which I could add, but I think that the most important thing is that is what you said. Yes, this phenomenon is there. It could be there. The danger is there.
Yes.
Yeah. We should not really brush it away. We should not really take it lightly. There could be an unhealthy sort of, dynamic in the society as well, where we become just, some cult. But it's not necessarily it doesn't describe the whole situation accurately, and it's not I wouldn't say it's even a prevalent thing. I would say it's there, it exists, but I wouldn't say that this is the general tendency which is there. I think this assertion is very much wrong, that there is a very general, tendency to take Srila Prabhupada and forget about everything else. There are so many healthy development is there, inspired by Srila Prabhupada and his liberal attitude and his broad-mindedness and his, and his attitude towards Krishna consciousness. And at the same time, as you said, this is the trick. The trick is not to go to one extreme or another extreme, to become too liberal or to become too narrow-minded. How to combine these two tendencies which are there, the chastity to Prabhupada's teachings, and to Prabhupada's mood, and to his parampara, message, and at the same time broad-mindedness. And there is definitely a lot of extremes on the two sides of the spectrum. So I guess we should find this golden
balance.
Yeah. So let's go to another question. We only have two questions. Actually, fifth question you already answered. How to deal with seemingly contradictory instructions of Srila Prabhupada? How to avoid misinterpretations of his instructions? How do we understand which instructions we are to follow in a given situation? Maybe you can add something to what you already said, but you already mentioned a couple of times that the seeming contradiction is a result of different circumstances, different personalities to whom Srila Prabhupada speaks, and we should understand the principle behind it that you already said.
Yeah, as far as how do we understand which instructions we're to follow in a given situation, we've also somewhat addressed that, about the importance of taking shelter and in the other Vaishnavas who we have confidence and trust that they've given their lives to Srila Prabhupada. Why couldn't they help me gain a better understanding of an important decision that I have to make in my life? And therefore not simply relying on my own interpretation of Prabhupada's instruction according to time, place, and circumstance. But if everybody has someone in their lives that they trust and they have faith and who inspire them as a true Prabhupada Nuga, then why not seek guidance and direction in making an important decision and hear from them also? And if it resonates, and if we can't make the decision ourselves, even if it doesn't fully resonate, but if we follow it anyways faithfully, then Krishna will help it to resonate when the time is right for it to resonate, by either helping us to understand it was the best approach to take, because we didn't simply make it based upon my own mental impulse, but I took shelter of somebody else, and therefore I'll follow their good advice, their sound advice. That's another. That's in the way that we certainly can become more resolute in making a decision.
It's interesting what you said. I gave a lecture during this hermeneutical course. The hermeneutics was, accepted by the GBC, and the whole hermeneutical process was described by the work of a group of scholarly devotees. And I was asked to give some lectures on this topic. So, because that's very much related to this topic of hermeneutics, how to how to extract the meaning of what Prabhupada said, how to reconcile different statements, how to understand what is most important, how to understand the spirit. And, I was describing historically why it is now the time to really develop the hermeneutical skill. And hermeneutics is not, it's not only science, it's an art in itself. And as any art, it has something which is, not rationally or logically describable. There is also a kind of intuitive feeling which you have to develop.
That's right.
By knowing the whole corpus of Srila Prabhupada and his message, and kind of connecting with this particular statement with the whole mood of Srila Prabhupada, which is sometimes it's not entirely rational. It's partially, at least, intuitive and wholesome. So, but what I was speaking, that during Prabhupada's time, hermeneutical process was very simple. If you didn't understand something, you could just ask Prabhupada. Prabhupada, what do you mean? why you can write to him the letter, and Prabhupada was so diligent and in answering all the letters which he would receive, so he would answer. Then when Prabhupada left, then the hermeneutical process was also simple, more complex, but still simple, because behind Prabhupada there were his followers who very much knew his instructions on a particular topic. And the authority of these followers of Srila Prabhupada was very much established in the society and impeccable. Everyone knew that, Tamal Krishna Maharaj knows the most about Prabhupada's instruction about the management, for example, right? Because he was dealing in this relationship with him. And, if you had some doubts, you could always ask Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and everyone knew that Jayadvaita Maharaj was the most trusted, editor of Srila Prabhupada, and Jayadvaita Maharaj and his crew. If you had some doubts about certain things, you could ask him. And, there were some other followers who's like Bhaktisvarup Damodar Goswami was the authority on BI, and Sadaputta Prabhu perhaps, and some other people.
And Brahmananda Prabhu was the authority on 26 Second Avenue.
Yeah. yeah. And of course, Satsvarup Maharaj was an authority on Prabhupada's life and Prabhupada's biography and details of this. And, there were so many prominent disciples who were trusted by the society of the devotees, because they knew that they had intimate relationship with Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada personally trained them in certain areas, like Yamuna or some other people were trained as cooks, or Bhakticharu Maharaj were personally trained as cooks, and Prabhupada appreciated their cooking. There were people who were trained in deity worship and this and that. But what happened after that, the authority of these people, of these followers of Srila Prabhupada, was somewhat shaken or diluted by the criticism offered by some detractors, and by some other events, which unfortunate events which happened. And now people are lost, more or less, and therefore this hermeneutical process or skill, I wouldn't even say that this is just a methodical process. It's rather a skill is very important. And to do this hermeneutical process, to be sure that you are speaking in accordance to Srila Prabhupada, his mood and everything, you really have to know a lot of Prabhupada's said, but not in a selected way, but in a very wholesome way, so to speak, in a very, complete way. And for that, you really understand, you have to really understand the essence of it, the core of it, the core teachings, the most important element of this hermeneutical process is to be trained in the core teachings in the Siddhantas, to establish firmly Siddhantas and to understand how different instructions of Srila Prabhupada are related to this core eternal truths, Siddhantas, which are always there. And then you can understand that this is the instruction according to time, place, and circumstance. But this is the instruction which is eternal, which has eternal value. And then you can judge the relative weight, so to speak, of this instruction and that instruction, because this is what is needed to understand. This instruction is more important than that instruction, because this is a more particular case and this is more general instruction. Anyway, so that's probably this whole thing. We started in this Bhaktivedanta University, we started the course, but I'm not satisfied with the course. I think we should really give a very elaborate, understanding what does it mean, how to extract the essence of the particular instruction, or to understand what is Prabhupada's mood and how to apply Prabhupada's mood in a modern situation which we encounter with something like this. Yeah.
Even the topic of hermeneutics, though, can be so hard to resolve.
Yeah.
It's
no, it's an art. It's an art.
I was just going to say, I completely agree with the use of your word. It's an art, It's just like there's an art of sadhana, there's an art of bhakti, it's an art of hermeneutics, knowing how to accept, on what grounds, what basis to accept statements from an authority that should be, revered, worshipped, and seen as an absolute authority. It's so hard. So hard to actually to come to an agreement. And although as much as I hear about, I'd be very interested to hear more about this hermeneutics class that you're going to be giving. It's essential, but at the same time, I have to say that I'm wary that it doesn't become too academic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, too academic and too formalized.
Too formalized, yeah.
Yeah, it should not give an impression that now you have ready-made formulas, and by applying these ready-made universal formulas, you can basically know everything and decide everything and become an authority on everything and anything.
Krishna just doesn't work that way.
No.
So this one thing that we have to learn as we make advancement in Krishna consciousness is that Krishna is always free to act as he wishes. He always has his independent will, and he's not going to conform to a set of rules.
Yes.
Whatever rules we lay down for him, he's not bound to conform to them. There's only one means to bind him, and it's not by rules and regulations.
I guess it's a good way to conclude our dialogue on this topic, because what you just said about Krishna is also applicable in relationship to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada is very much alive, and you cannot really kill him by putting him into some shape that shape, which is, which is, and start using him as a tool to exploit others.
As a hammer.
Yeah, hammer. Yeah, Prabhupada is very much alive, and we should keep him alive by, praying to him, by speaking about him, by hearing about him, and by developing relationship with him, and by appreciating how he's alive, how he's spontaneous, and how he's liberal and at the same time so strict.
And how he's alive in the hearts of those who love him.
Yeah. We still have 5 minutes to go, so I guess we can answer a question from the listeners to make our conversation more alive. So I don't know who will give us the questions. Is there anyone there? I don't see any questions in the chat, but I don't think it was meant to put the question.
Харе Кришна, примите поклоны, пожалуйста.
Ага.
Чат был выключен, сейчас его включили, и преданные могут написать свои вопросы в чат.
Okay. So they just turned on the chat and they can have the questions, but
oh, there's a lot of questions in the chat.
no, but that's all the questions.
Oh, no, those are the questions that we were covering.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, got it.
Maybe you can say a few words about the last question, how Prabhupada was developing relationship with his disciple, what Srila Prabhupada liked in their behavior, mood, and actions, whom among his disciples did he consider to be close and dear, whether any simple devotees, quote unquote, simple devotees, who did not perform outstanding service, but whom Srila Prabhupada loved very much.
Well, the last question, an obvious person is Jayananda Prabhu. Yeah. Prabhupada loved Jayananda, and he was not, he was not a big
intellectual
leader. In fact, Jayananda, he was the president of San Francisco, and he asked Prabhupada if he could leave presidency and he wanted to become a driver of a bus on Radha Damodar. And he gave up position because he was just so unassuming, unpretentious. And he was just, he was always in the background. That was the one thing you always hear about Jayananda Prabhu. And Prabhupada just loved him so much that, when he asked if he could be a driver on the bus, he just immediately told him, yes, please go. And he let him drive a bus on Radha Damodar, and he gave up his presidency. And Prabhupada always talked about Jayananda in terms of how he gave his donation of $5,000 for the printing of his first book, and things that Prabhupada said about Jayananda when he heard he departed. Prabhupada cried, he was just he wasn't like a big. But he just wasn't, it wasn't a big splash, no position. But Prabhupada so much appreciated him. So he cried. And after Jayananda departed, but he wanted to hear everything about what Jayananda Prabhu was doing, the circumstances of his departure, and then he wrote that beautiful letter about Jayananda. I say he was a good example of somebody who was not, but he was immortalized. He was so simple without a big position, but he was immortalized by Prabhupada because he loved his simplicity.
And Prabhupada said that his departure day should be included in Vaishnava calendar.
And not only that, but there shouldn't be a Rath Yatra card in the movement without his picture on it. Every Rath Yatra card, I'm always conscious of that. Every Rath Yatra we ever had, every year, always had Jayananda Prabhu's picture on it. Always. He immortalized him, Prabhupada. Well, that's an example of somebody who is simple, but Prabhupada loved.
I was told that Jayananda Prabhu was an exceptional case in the sense that while he was giving lectures, sometimes he would fall asleep himself while giving the lectures. Usually nobody does it. They put
But he was
others
always working so hard, he deserved it. So, I mean, that's the first person that came to my mind when I heard that question about Jayananda Prabhu. You know, but what was the
He also
huh?
loved much Yamuna, who was not also, I mean, he was.
Oh yeah. And he also loved Bhakti Swarup Damodar Swami.
Yeah.
He really loved Bhakti Swarup Damodar Swami. Yeah. Always talking about him. My scientist disciple. You know, and he would always speak to him in a very, very friendly way. And yeah, and he would always, yeah. There's certain, of course, Bhakti Swarup Damodar. Well, he was a brahmachari. He was a brahmachari. He wasn't a big leader. He was Prabhupada's scientist. You know, it wasn't like that he was a big managerial leader. Of course, he was responsible for the Bhaktivedanta Institute, but I'm sure we could come up with a whole long list of devotees that Prabhupada loved who were simple, but
Yeah.
these are the first ones that come to my mind. And Jamuna also, of course, definitely.
He also loved very much Shyamasundar Prabhu. Well, Shyama
Oh,
Sundar
definitely.
was a big leader, but still he was loved not because he was a big leader, but because he was
Loved by Prabhupada.
yeah,
Also.
independently, irrespectively of, you know, I just read this this description in his book, how other devotees decided that Shyama Sundar should not be Srila Prabhupada's secretary. And they presented it to Srila Prabhupada and kind of forced Srila Prabhupada to reject him as a secretary. And how Srila Prabhupada was, it was very difficult for him. And how he was almost crying, actually. He did agree with them and kind of went their way, but at the same time, he gave so much love to Shyama Sundar Prabhu, and you know, it was a very, you know, touching part.
I'm reading volume 3 of Chasing Rhinos with the Swami right now. Shyama Sundar really comes out with it, you know, a lot of things about his lack of qualification and just Prabhupada's mercy in many places. You know, he's very frank, honest, very candid, you know, about himself.
Yeah. And this is from the 3rd volume. Yes, this story is from the 3rd volume. We are already over time, but let me ask you the last question. We will not from Bhava Bhavini. Can a person or a devotee blindly follow the process which was given by Srila Prabhupada because he or she is not very intelligent or not very intelligent? In other words, can anyone be broad-minded? There is an inborn, that there is some tendency for being sectarian. It can be the manifestation of undeveloped intelligence. In other words, what she is asking, you know, some people are blind followers because they just lack intelligence. Can anyone develop the broad-mindedness and understand the essence? Because there is there may be some lack of material qualification to develop this particular quality of intelligence. So that's basically the essence of what she's asking.
Would you be inclined, because I really don't fully understand the question, and because you read it in Russian, would you be inclined to answer the question?
I can. Basically what she says that some people by nature are fanatical, sectarian, narrow-minded, and when they join Srila Prabhupada's movement, they become fanatical, sectarian followers of Srila Prabhupada. What is the chance for these people? We're talking about being liberal, being broad-minded, being this, being that, but some people have natural limitations. And my answer to these questions would be, yes, there may be some pre-existing tendencies in us, but we're made of the association. And if we associate with people and if we closely serve these people, then their quality comes to us. Their quality come to us, and we develop similar nature and similar attitude despite of our lack of qualification or lack of proper qualities in the beginning. So the question is proper association. If we are in a proper association, then even though the tendency for fanaticism or narrow-mindedness is there, it will not manifest, it will not fructify, because the association is a very strong force, and it influences us more even than inborn tendencies which are there. Even though these tendencies are strong as well, but the association is stronger, especially if we keep the proper mood in the association. If we're not trying to impose our nature, deficient nature upon others, but rather serve others and see how others are doing, we can develop similar nature despite initial lack of qualification. So that would be my answer to this question.
I would say the only thing that I would say in addition to that, which you've already said essentially, is that Lord Chaitanya has said is, I will personally deliver anyone who chants Hare Krishna and doesn't offend Vaishnavas.
Yeah. The crux is not to offend Vaishnavas. And for that, you need good association. For that, you need the association with people who are not offensive and not defensive. Because offenses usually come from defensive-ness, from some insecurities. Anyway, Niranjan, thank you very much for your association, for giving 2 hours, even more, of your valuable time. And I hope that this conversation will help many people to strengthen their relationship with Srila Prabhupada, which will strengthen our movement and will make our movement better.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you for considering that I'm somebody who's qualified to speak on this topic. It's very magnanimous of you.
No. Again, thank you so much. I was enriched by this conversation with you, and there is something to think about. Maybe I should write another book about Srila Prabhupada. Actually, I was planning to give second volume of the book, but
What you should do is you should make sure there's an English version.
yeah, there is a work going on now on English version. I have to check what's going on.
That's
Some
essential.
people-
That's essential.
Okay.
So we're
Thank
going to end here then. Thank
Yeah.
you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me, and stay in touch.
Yeah. Maybe organizers can let everyone unmute and give some last feedback to us if somebody
Last
wants.
feedback.
So just a few words. Anyway, 154 people are there in Zoom, so it's good.
Hare Krishna. Was this streamed also on YouTube?
Yeah, it was streamed on YouTube,
Uh-huh.
and then probably more people are there on YouTube. Okay, thank you. I guess
Is that why we're staying on? Is this just to see this video about Prabhupada? Or?
no, that's I think Manmohan turned it on, but nobody speaks.
Okay. If Srila Prabhupada didn't come,
Didn't come.
Yeah,
What would happen?
what would happen? That's right.
How would we live our life?
How will we live our lives? Hare Krishna. All right,
Okay.
I'm going to go.
Okay. Yes,
Thank you,
I'll see.
Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Thank
Glories
you.
to Prabhupada.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada.